Why doesn't someone who was here last week kind of give us a little bit of a recap? What were some of the things we talked about last week?
The descendants of Cain and the firstborn that took 2 wives.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, we talked about chapter 4 talks all about the descendants of Cain, and you've got Lamech, and you've got all of that. And then chapter 5 talks about the descendants of Seth, right? Seth's lineage. We start to talk about them there. What were some of the things that we saw in the lineage?
It was possible by word of mouth, the overlap in the lives of some of these men, that they could pass stories down, the word down.
That's right. That's right. If you look at the chronology, and that's why we had the chart last week, that's why we used the TV, so you could kind of visualize some of these things. But if you looked at that chart, you could see that it was like 4 people in between, Adam and Abraham. You've got like a line of 4, so they could have passed this down. Now we don't know for sure who knew who, but it's very easy to see that the word of mouth could have been there to pass on. Adam could have told word of mouth what had happened, what he knew about, and then he could have passed it on. The next person passed it on. Shem could have passed it on to Abraham, those kind of things. So very interesting kind of thing to see there. What else? Was there anything else in that lineage that we kind of noticed?
I don't know if it was last week or the week before, and we emphasized, and he died.
Right. Yes. And that was important. Why was that important?
Because we don't know of death before that.
Well, yeah, in the garden there's no death, and here you've got this lineage, and the major significance is, you remember, what did Satan tell Eve?
She wouldn't die.
She wouldn't die. She was saying God's a liar.
Right.
Because God said, in the day you eat this, you're going to begin this dying process. You're going to die, and you'll eventually turn to dust. You're going to die. And Satan comes along and says, you're not going to die. And then here in the lineage, very interesting, the repeated words here are, so-and-so begot, this child, whatever, and then he died. And then he died. God was right. And here's the effects of sin, that even a godly line like Seth's line, they're going to die. Now, there is an exception. What was the exception? Enoch, right? Enoch, 7th from Adam, Enoch. And what did it say about Enoch? He walked with God, something that we don't see anywhere else in the lineage pointed out, which means it should be highlighted in our mind. God's pointing this out for a reason. There's something special about Enoch. He walks with God. There's something going on there. And then he was taken. So very interesting kind of things there.
Something else I found interesting about Enoch was that he was considerably younger than those other men when he died. He was 365 years old.
Did he die?
When he
We're so used to seeing he died, but yes, when he was taken from the earth, right? When he walked with God and God took him, right? He was no more because he couldn't be found because God took him.
I didn't mean to say that.
No, that's all right. That's all right. But yeah, that's specifically interesting because it doesn't say that he died. He was taken. So there's some interesting things that go on there. Anything else before we... Seth's line is righteous, and we know that because of what it says at the beginning, right? What does it say at the beginning of his lineage?
Begin to call on the name of the Lord.
Yeah, they began to call upon the name of the Lord. It doesn't say anything like that prior to this. And we looked at a couple biblical examples. Abraham, he builds an altar to the Lord, and then it says he called upon the name of the Lord there. There's some kind of worship going on. In the New Testament, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. So there's something going on there, some kind of relational worship kind of aspect. These people are worshipers of God. Did it say anything like that about Cain's line? There's nothing in there that said anything like they were worshipers of God, right? Nothing. They did all these other kinds of things, but nothing about worshiping God. So the importance of chapter 4 and of chapter 5 is to see that there's a divergent, there's sections here, that the family of Adam and Eve are breaking off into two lines, right? That's what 4 and 5 is all about, to show these two lines. There's a godly line. They follow God. They begin to worship God. They call upon his name. They're doing all that kind of stuff there. Even Enoch, who's in that line, he walks with God. He's taken something special going on there. And then you've got Cain's line, and they're just getting worse and worse. And the one example of that getting worse is Lamech, who has the multiple wives. He's the first polygamist that we know of. He's bragging about, abusing people, killing people, that kind of stuff. So we see a radical difference going off in these two lines. All right, a lot of good stuff there. All right, so finishing up in chapter 5, in verse 29, it says that Lamech, remember these names are similar. Some of them are the same, but they're different lines. This is not the old Lamech and Cain's line. This is Seth's line. But in verse 29, it says that Lamech names his son Noah. And why does he name his son Noah? What does the text say?
He'll comfort us.
Comfort us? Anybody else? What's your translation say?
Mine said he bring us relief from our work.
Yes.
From the painful toil of our hands.
Which reminds us of what?
The curse
What?
put on us.
The curse. He names him Noah because they're longing for what?
Relief.
Relief. They're longing for rest. They're longing for this painful toil, this curse that they're under. They're longing for this. So here's this man, Lamech. He's in a godly line. And his son here, he names him Noah because it sounds similar to this idea of rest, relief, something along those lines. So the people are looking for rest and release from the curse that the first sin brings about. The land is cursed and all of that. And so they're just longing for that. And the people are looking for one who will undo the curse. Was there a promise about one who would come? In Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. Yeah, there was going to be one, right? The seed of the woman was going to come. He was going to bruise the head of the serpent. It was going to, if your head is bruised, crushed. It's the idea of crushed. If your head is crushed, can you live? No. It's a death blow, right? Your head is crushed. It's a death blow. But the serpent will strike or crush or bruise the heel of the seed to come. If your heel is crushed, can you still live? You can, but will you be in pain? Will there be some kind of suffering that goes on? There is.
Maybe crippled.
Yeah. On the cross, we see the crushing of the head of the serpent, of Satan. Satan's head is crushed. All of the stuff that he brought about by his tempting and being wicked and all that kind of stuff is taken care of on the cross. Now, the cross, Jesus is, his heel, metaphorically, is crushed because he suffers, he dies, but on the third day he rose up from the grave. He arose right? So there's victory there. So he had to go through this suffering, but these people are remembering this. I'm sure the stories are being told, right? Somebody's telling. We're waiting for someone to come, and they're looking and they're longing for relief. And so this man's name is Noah. Now, is Noah the one who's to come? No. But from Noah's line will come the one. If you look at, you don't have to turn there, you can if you'd like to, but in Matthew 11:28, Jesus, who is in the line of Noah, who is in the line of Seth, right? This is the seed of the woman to come. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Finally, the one the one they were anticipating, the one we were all, as a human family, were longing for, that you can see here with Lamech, finally, in Jesus, we finally get that rest. That rest. Things are changed now. We've got glory to come and resurrection and all of that good stuff. So they're anticipating this. This man is looking for it. And we today get to reap the benefits of this final one who's to come. So important to notice that. And we mentioned in the sermon the idea of names, something significant about the names. So here again, Noah's name has to do with this idea of rest, relief, something along those lines. Our true rest is finally found in Jesus Christ. It's good news. Anything else anybody wants to say? Any comments before we shift into chapter 6? Everybody ready for 6? All right. Well, that was a good study. We'll see you next week. All right. Let's take a look at 6. Let's read the first 8 verses. 6, 1 through 8. Would somebody like to do that, please?
When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, or giants, on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children with them. They were the heroes of old men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord has grieved that he has made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them.
Thank you. All right, so what's going on in this section?
Corruption is increasing on the earth.
Corruption is increasing. Yeah, things are getting worse and worse. And when we've talked about this, once sin enters the picture, we see Adam and Eve. Sin causes shame. It causes fear of God, where they hide. They try to hide from God. It causes a breakdown in the marriage. They blame. The blame game begins. We see that sin just kind of starts to roll on, and it affects one another. And Cain kills Abel, and then you've got Lamech, and you've got all this kind of stuff going on. And here we just see that it's getting worse. Things are getting worse. But why does it get worse? How does this start out?
They're intermarrying.
There's an intermarriage going on. So let's ask the question, right? Everybody wants to get to and talk about who are the sons of God in this text.
The line of Seth.
The line of Seth. Is that what everybody thinks?
Seems to fit.
Okay, all right. There's a number of views out there that you may or may not have come across. One view says the sons of God are angels. Fallen angels, right? They're angels. Sons of God are angels, and they've come here and they cohabitate with women, and they get these, the Nephilim are these half-breed angel, human kind of things. Does anybody know where people get that idea from? Why do they go there? Has anybody heard that before first?
No, I've heard it. Oh, yeah.
The Jehovah's Witnesses teach that. They're not the only ones, though. They're not the only ones. Okay. There are some within the church that teach that kind of thing. Absolutely. And one of the places that people like to go is they like to go to Job. Everybody jump over to Job for a moment. Look at Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1, verse 6. Job 1, verse 6. Tim, you have that? Would you mind reading it?
One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them.
Okay, so his says angels. Mine says, now there was a day when the sons of God came. Does anybody else say sons of God?
New King James.
Got a number of
Sons
them.
God.
Number of them that say. So his
Mine
is
has a reference that the Hebrew is the sons of God.
sons of God. So that's more of an interpretive text, right? That translation that he's using, they're saying this is angels. Now in the context, seems pretty clear that this is angels, right? In Job, does that seem clear? I mean, you look, Satan's coming, God's calling them up to his heavenly throne room, all that. If you look at chapter 2, verse 1, it says the same thing. And again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them and presented himself before the Lord. So it does seem, to me anyways, it's pretty clear that in Job, sons of God does seem to refer to angelic beings. So that's where people go. And they say, see, it's the same thing. You've got sons of God here, and you've got sons of God in Job. Has to be the same thing. Has to be angelic beings in one and in the other.
What is it, the same Hebrew word?
It's the same phrase in Hebrew, yes. It is the same phrase in Hebrew. So that's one view. Another view is, and we're going to explore this a little more. Another view is that this is talking about royal or noble people. So the sons of God are these royal, noble, kingly kind of people at this time. And then there's a third view, which is what most of you, or at least a number of you, said, the line of Seth. That this is the godly line of Seth. If I said to you, though, prove to me that this isn't angels, that this is Seth's line, that this is humans, the sons of God, how would you convince me? What would you say? How would we know that this is not angels?
Well, there's nothing we've read in the Bible so far that would indicate there's anything outside the realm of normal procreation.
Okay.
We haven't been told that yet, that there is a possibility that outside powers could come and procreate with
Right.
human beings. We don't have any record.
Unless this is the first. Yeah.
And
Unless
that
this,
must go
right?
on. You don't-
Unless this is the first
Right,
indication.
right.
There's nothing else prior to this,
Right,
but potentially this could be it.
But then there's nothing else after it either.
There's nothing else after it that says anything about this is it. There's nothing else. Okay, so there's nothing else that goes after this. So if you take this one text out, just to kind of say, okay, let's kind of orient ourselves. We take this one text out of the Bible and say, where else do we find anything about angels procreating with humans, or even just the ability to procreate, that kind of thing? Well, do we find it in there? So we don't. There's nothing else in there. But this still could be. So go ahead.
There is something in there about we will be like the angels, neither male nor female, when we die.
Well, you're almost quoting it right. It doesn't say male and female. It does say that giving and taking in marriage will be like the angels who neither give nor take in marriage. Jesus said that. We'll look at that text. So yes, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Is there anything in this text? Well, let me tell you this. If you look in commentaries, the majority of commentaries that were, older commentaries will say that this is angels. Not all of them, but a good number of them. What I found personally was, looking at these commentaries, is the majority of the commentaries that say that this is talking about angels are liberal. That is, they don't believe the Bible or the miracles. So what they do is they try to understand this in light of the other cultures around. So many of them will say Genesis is just stealing from pagan religions, because there are pagan religions that talk about gods having sex with humans, yes? You've heard of Zeus, Aphrodite, you've heard of the half-breeds that come out of them, right? The demigods, that kind of stuff. So like Hercules, You've heard of these kind of things? So these commentators, again, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are liberal, and they don't believe the miracles of the Bible or anything. They're saying this is really just the Jews stealing from the pagans, and because they don't believe that there's multiple gods, they just said they're angels. And so there you go. Here's how you get that in there. So that's something to think about. But I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't think that the Jews are stealing from, that Moses is stealing from the pagans and kind of reinterpreting it. Here's the thing. Does sons of God ever refer to humans? Is it because if it only refers to angels in Job, that's a pretty strong case. It does. It does. Look at... It probably could have used doing a PowerPoint tonight, would have been easy. Let me run through these texts because I'm going to do them quick. Write them down. If you can't write them down, I'll give them to you later. Okay? So for the moment, just let me read them to you. But make note of them. Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. In that text, it's talking about Israel. In fact, some of your translations will actually say the children of Israel or the sons of Israel. It's talking about humans in that section. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Luke chapter 20, verse 36. Luke 20, 36 says, this is the text you were alluding to, Gail. "For they cannot die anymore," it's talking about the resurrection, "because they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection." So there, you might have been alluding to that one there. So he's talking about people resurrected. There's an equality to the angels. In Romans 8:14, it says, Romans 8, verse 14, "For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God." Romans 8:19 says, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." And I'll give you one more. Galatians chapter 3:26 says, "For in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith." So are there texts in the Bible that call humans sons of God? Yes. Yes, there are. In fact, they outnumber the two in Job. Well, there's three. There's three in Job. They outnumber the three in Job.
So in the translation, in the Bible, to translate in Job to angels, it doesn't translate that way in the other verses. It translates as sons of God instead of angels.
Say it again so I can understand what you're asking.
My Bible continuously says sons of God.
Yeah. Sons of God, yes.
So some of them are translating to angels in Job, correct?
Yes, Tim had a translation. I don't. What translation you using, Tim? The NIV.
So in the NIV, are the other verses that you just listed, the Matthew, Romans, Luke,
They would be translated as sons of God.
So
Yeah.
in the same Bible, it's translated two different ways.
Yes.
The Hebrew
Yes.
word is the same word.
Yes. Now, the Hebrew is the Old Testament, Greek is the New Testament, but the phrase is the same phrase, right? It's sons of God, whether it's in Hebrew or whether it's in Greek, it's sons of God. But, yes, in some Bible translations, they're interpreting the text for you a little more than others. Some are a little bit more, they say literal or something like that. They try to give you a word for word. So sons of God is what the Hebrew says. The NIV says, we're going to interpret that for you and tell you it just means angels. So that's what they're doing there. But the underlying Hebrew text says sons of God in those places. And that's what Tim mentioned. He said there's a little footnote that says the Hebrew says sons of God. So good question to ask, because that can be confusing, can't it? You read through the English text, it can be kind of confusing. This is saying, and you may even come across, and I came across one today, a translation that actually says in Genesis chapter 6, these are divine beings. So that's real, that's interpreting the text for you. So if you read that, it would clearly mean that this is angelic beings, right? If you read that. But the underlying Hebrew doesn't say that. So we want to look at context as well. So first of all, just because the phrase sons of God is used does not necessarily mean it's talking about angels. Yes, in Job it appears to be angels, but in Deuteronomy, as well as another text that we looked at, sons of God is used for humans. Used for what kind of humans?
Righteous.
Yes, those who are following God, those who are serving God, those who are walking with, especially in the New Testament, walking with Christ, that kind of thing. So that should lend as we work through this text, that should come into our minds. Is there anywhere in this text that we read that mentioned anything about angels? Taking out the phrase sons of God, is there anything else in the text that would indicate that there's angels involved, some kind of divine beings other than God? What's that?
What does it mean by giants?
The Nephilim, the giants.
Is that literally just larger?
It says giants. Yeah, the Nephilim is most seem to understand that to be giants. There were giants in the land at that time. But that doesn't say anything about angelic beings. That just says there were giants. If you look at the text, now here's context. Context is king. Context is key. If you read this text, listen to it. Ready? When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, we don't know what they are at the moment, but the sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive. And they took as their wives, what did they do? They took as they're marrying, right? That's how you get a wife, is you marry. They took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore them children. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Let me ask you, did you hear the idea of men, man, daughters, wives over and over and over again? You can read through that whole chapter 6, and you will never come across angelic being or angel. If you just take the sons of God out for a moment and look, is there anything else in the text that says anything about angels? There's nothing in there. Yes?
In that verse 4, he refers to two groups of people.
Yes.
When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans. We've got gods and we've got humans.
Well, it says the sons of God, but that's what we're trying to figure out. Are sons of God angels or are they humans?
No, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So it says
That's
that.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a spiritual side here in the sons of God as
Yes.
opposed to the human side.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding you right, there's those who were spiritually minded. Is that what you're saying? And then there's those who were earthly minded.
No, not minded.
You think these are angels?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else in the text other than where it says sons of God? Because sons of God can be used of humans, right?
Right.
So is there anything else in the text? Do we ever have the angels being judged? In Genesis chapter 6, 7, 8, in the flood and all of that, does God judge any heavenly beings? No. Who does he judge? Humans. In Genesis chapter 3, we had Satan in the form of a serpent. When God brings judgment upon those who sinned, did God judge Satan as well?
No, he didn't.
No.
He didn't. He didn't say there was judgment. There's one to come who's going to crush your head. There is judgment. He said this is going to happen, right? That you're going to crawl on your belly, eat dust all the right. This is symbolic, but this is going to happen, and then your head will be crushed. That kind of thing. So it's interesting that in Genesis chapter 3, when you have an angelic being involved in the sin of man sins, everybody gets covered. God's judgment comes upon everybody. And we read it. It's clear. Here, if this is angelic beings, we've got no discussion of them being judged. And yet God did judge them he judges Satan in chapter 3 and tells us he's judged. Here, we got nothing. It's only humans. Now what's interesting is, if you look at angelic beings, at the tomb of Jesus, when the angel comes and rolls away the stone, what happens to the guards?
They're stonied.
They become like dead men. They fall. In the book of Revelation, when John sees an angel speaking to him, he does what? Does anybody remember? Falls down, is ready to worship the angel. And the angel says, don't do that. If these are angelic beings who are coming down, taking all these women, who holds the greater responsibility? These powerful angelic beings or the humans? Well, why don't we have any discussion of the judgment of these angelic beings? Like we did in Genesis chapter 3. The only people who are judged are humans.
Well, they're surely fallen angels.
But how come we don't know that they're fallen? How come we don't have any discussion of their judgment like we did in Genesis chapter 3? I'm just trying to work through the text here. If you take sons of God to mean humans, like we have elsewhere, it makes perfect sense that the judgment falls upon humanity. And notice what we're building up to. Chapter 4 was the lineage of Cain, right? Chapter 5 is the lineage of Seth. We've got the good line, the bad line. It would make perfect sense if we read this to say the good line starts to intermarry with the bad line. And what happens when you intermarry? When the spiritual-minded, the godly people start to intermarry with the ungodly, what happens?
Destroys.
The ungodly starts to influence the godly. Solomon had lots of wives. Many of them were pagan. What happened to him? His wives turned his heart. We've got examples of this happen. Godly people, right? Paul says, what does he say about company? The company you keep.
Evil communication.
Evil company, bad company corrupts good morals. What tends to happen is the unrighteous tend to influence the righteous. So what I believe is going on here contextually is you've got the setup in chapter 4 and chapter 5 of these two lines that are diverging. And then in chapter 6, you've got the coming together because the sons of God, the righteous people who are walking with God, started to look at the physical appearance of the daughters of men, the Canaanite line, the Cain line, and they saw they were beautiful, so they decided that they were going to marry. So they weren't thinking spiritually at this point, they were thinking physically. They're looking at beauty and all of that kind of stuff. So then you end up with the intermarrying and the intermixing, and then you've got judgment that God is going to bring upon them. Now, if this is angels, then Jesus says in Luke chapter 20, 34 through 36, Jesus says the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to the age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. Notice that he says there's an equality with the angels once we reach the resurrection. In Matthew 22, 29 through 30, Jesus says, you are wrong. He's fighting with the Sadducees who don't believe in the resurrection. He says, you are wrong because you know neither the scripture nor the power of God, for in the resurrection, talking about humans, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven. So it seems clear that Jesus believed that angels don't marry.
Yeah.
In heaven.
I don't
Well, anywhere. He's talking about going to heaven, that they don't marry. So if they don't marry, then
I can't.
procreation and sex is within marriage, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So if they can't marry, why would God give them the ability to procreate?
I don't think they're angels.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think they're angels either. But I'm saying we're trying to build a case as to why. And if you look at what Jesus says, he seems to say angels don't have sex. They don't give and take in marriage. They're not populating. They're not repopulating. We've got nowhere else in the Bible that says angels can cohabitate and intermingle with humans, just in Genesis 6. But again, we've already understood that there's a possibility that taking the sons of God to mean godly people, a godly line. And if we look at chapter 4 and chapter 5 and then chapter 6, it's all leading up to something. It's a whole story that's unfolding. Does that make sense? Now, you don't have to agree with me. I'm okay if you don't agree with me. All right? But prove to me that it's angels, and I'll go with you. But I have to go with what Jesus said. I have to go with the context of what's in here, and I go with what the phrase means. And more often than not, the phrase is talking about godly humans. There is a distinction in the text, but I believe it's between two groups of humans, which was chapter 4 and chapter 5, right? And I keep going back to that because that's the context of the book.
I keep going back to verse 4. I can't get away from that.
Sure.
He divides it. He talks about the sons of God
Yes.
and the daughters of humans.
Right, well,
two different
yeah.
classes. Why doesn't he say the daughters of God went to the daughters of humans?
Well, because it looks like the men are the ones who are going to the women. The godly men are going to ungodly women. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay.
I mean, again, if you can prove to me from I'll go with you. But
Prove to me, I'll go with you.
great. Well, I just go with what Jesus said, and he said angels don't give or take in marriage. This says the sons of God married any they wanted. So,
But it didn't say, I'm.
yeah, go for it.
I'm on the
Throw it out
fence,
there.
Okay, I'm not saying one way. It did say the angels do not marry, but it
Yes.
did not say they do not procreate.
That's true. But we don't have any text that says they do. There's no text that say that angels do procreate. We have no text that say that angels can come down here
You have what it says.
and marry. Well, I would say I would take what Jesus said.
But that was the marriage, not the procreation.
But the point he says is, no, look at the text again. The point is we won't be having
I know.
offspring, right? Jesus said we're not going to have offspring. We're going to be like the angels who don't give and take in marriage, which is where you have offspring.
And this says they did take them in marriage.
That's what I'm saying. They did take. So these angels took these and they married these people?
That's the rub.
I mean, Jesus said they don't marry. You can go. No, it doesn't. It says they married any they chose. In 6?
Verse 2.
Yeah. Yeah, they married any they wanted.
Well, I think it's showing that, like Eve led Adam astray, these women, these
Sure.
daughters of humans or men,
Yeah.
I mean, they had to have a father. These daughters led these righteous men astray because
Sure.
these righteous men found them attractive and married them, and they led them astray, just like Eve led Adam astray.
Well, and just like Solomon is led astray by his wife, that's what I think. I think that's what the text is saying.
Progression.
I think so. And it's all focused on humans. I mean, humans get the judgment. The world is destroyed because humans are the ones doing it. So anyways, I can only go with what the text says. We can argue over whether the sons of God means humans or angels. I think contextually it means humans. You could say it means angels. But if they were able to come and take the form of a human or whatever they did then, can they do that today? And if not, why not? Because there's nothing in the Bible that says they can't, right?
God stops them. God did a lot of things back here that he doesn't do now.
Okay, but
I mean,
where
it's
does,
just
but where
he's
did
got
it,
control, he's got the power.
sure, but, so he let them do that then, but we have no reason to suspect that he wouldn't allow it today. Yeah,
What, I guess you could take since that comes right after this conversation, one could say that spirit is the fact that I have spiritual beings, angels, that are.
you could, but remember when man was created, God breathed the breath of life. Spirit is the same word. Breath, spirit, wind, it's the same word in Hebrew and Greek. So God is the one who controls the lifespan, because he's going to say they're only going to live, 120 years. We could talk about what that means, but he's basically saying you're not going to live longer than this point of time, right? I'm not going to allow you to live. God is the one who gives life. So that's the way I would read that text there. But again, it's okay. I don't mind. We can disagree. Others can disagree. I like this. I'm glad to wrestle with the text. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you remember when the scribes or Pharisees, they came to Jesus and they said, there was a man who married a woman.
Yeah.
And the man died. And then the man's younger brother, 7 times she married these
Yep.
brothers.
Yes.
And so in heaven, whose wife will she be?
Right.
And Jesus said, in heaven, there is no marriage and no giving in marriage.
That's right. That's what we read. I brought that text up. You're right.
Oh, you brought that?
Yes. Yeah. Both in Matthew and in Luke, there's a discussion of that kind of
I
thing.
couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that's where I would go as well. And again, I do think it's a valid question to ask. If they were able to do it back then, we have no reason to believe that they couldn't do it today, that God wouldn't allow them today. I mean, or we just don't. Why would he allow it at one point, not at another? We don't know. He just, he leaves it up in the air. We could. So the person you marry could be an angelic. We just don't know. We don't know. You know what I mean? If you're going to leave it out there like that, it just.
Well, the theory would be that they were all killed. With
Sure.
The flood, it killed off all the
Sure.
spiritual. That would be.
And
the
if
argument.
but they did it once. Could they do it again? No, God stopped them now. But nothing in the Bible says he stopped them from doing that.
That's as far as I could go.
Yeah,
with
we don't
it.
know.
That's
We don't
as
know.
far as I could go with it. I'm just.
Yeah, no, I get
throwing that
you.
out.
I don't mind. I really don't. I love this. I love wrestling with it. Yeah, I'm getting the wrap it up time. I could be here all night. I love it. Chew on it. I knew we were going to be here for a couple weeks. Chew on it. Think about it. We'll come back next week. We'll wrestle with it again. We'll talk about the Nephilim. Are the Nephilim the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of man? And if they're angels, is this the half-breed that we're talking about? That kind of stuff. Or are they mighty men of renown, which is what the text says? So wrestle with it. Think about it. Great conversation, guys. Mike, can I get you to close us? Thank you.